discussion. Perhaps we ought to just talk a little bit about where we saw the possibility for some cuts. As I took my notes tell me that the places that we have a possibility for cuts were, number one was fuel, number two was with our capital programs, and number three was maintenance programs. And I know that for the years I've been involved and been around, that's our policy as a city council has been to instruct our department heads to be putting away for those kinds of things. So I hate to see us start cutting them now. We are getting at a point, and we've seen this over the last couple of years, where we have hit the point where we have the capital funds. When a replacement's needed, we can buy that without having to borrow, or without having to increase fees and taxes. And that was the intent a number of years ago, as our instruction as a council, our policy was that, to instruct the department heads to make sure that as they budgeted, that was something they were looking towards, and we wanted that to happen. So, like I said, it concerns me that we would, just a few short years later, change that policy, because it's going to save us money in the long run, no debate about that. We've heard that already, where we're not paying interest because we don't have to get loans for these things. That was the whole intent. I remember well those discussions, and that was the intent behind that. And that's the only place I'm seeing here that we've got the possibility for cuts. And personally, I don't want to see that happen. I think the other thing that I would like to just quickly say is I took pretty meticulous notes the other night at our public hearing, because I think we do need to give our citizens the input, and I think we need to find other ways to give them input too. I think we do. I think we need to open up some dialogue between us and citizens the best we can to find out what the feel is, what they're experiencing, what they'd like to see happen. And there certainly was a feel of, and I get this, believe me, I'm a citizen too. I don't want my taxes to go up. I'd love to see them come down. There's no debate there. That's something that across the board that was discussed as a concern and as a legitimate concern. But I also heard discussions about the fact that we needed to sufficiently fund our fire and police department. We needed to make sure that safety was taken into consideration. One of the best experiences I personally have had on the council was a couple of good firemen took me to a training about a year ago, and I got put through the ringer, brother, and I came back a different man. I had to go into a burning building and help put out a fire. And I'm just telling you, as I came back, I look at this line item of replacing these breathing apparatus, and immediately I go back to having to go into that burning building with that breathing apparatus on. I was darn glad it was good apparatus and it was working. And I think, you know what, we got to make sure that as we send these men into harm's way, that they're equipped appropriately. That costs money. Those kinds of things are really expensive, and it brings a great heartache when we have to replace them, but we've got to do it. It's got to happen. That was the other thing was talked about, is making sure the equipment was there. And then there was quite a bit said about our roads and the fact that the roads need some attention, and we are very well aware of that. I know that. That's been a discussion of ours for some time now, and I see both at the city council level where we can make adjustments, and that they seem to be actually, in comparison, they're minimal. But the CDA right now has that as it's the number one item. It's top of the list. Nothing's going to knock it off the top of the list. And over the next 8 years, we're going to see some good things happen there. We also talked about how important it was that we have good trained people working for the city, and I totally agree, and I think we do. And not to look to any kind of layoffs, that wasn't the kind of thing that the citizens were asking towards, trying to take personnel away from the city. I look around and I think sometimes if we're not careful, we let general things that people feel about government be put into play when they don't have place. And I for years, have been very aware of our city employees and kind of watching them, the way they represent the city. We ask them to dress a little differently so they stand out. They represent the cities that are out there. In my years of tracking that, I can't count the times on one hand that I felt a little disappointment in something that I saw. And as I went and addressed that, 9 times out of 10, it was my perception that was out of line and not what was happening, even though it was just a few. And so I think we do have good trained personnel who represent the city well, and we don't want to be talking layoffs. We don't have an abundance of city employees. We've heard that there have been cuts made by natural attrition, which is the best way to make them if you can, rather than laying people off. And I just see some good things happening that way. So my attitude is, as I look at these, and in 2 weeks we've got to set a budget. I think we have 2 budgets in front of us that are very realistic that we need to be looking towards, and we need to find if this proposed suggested budget that the administration has come up with and said this is something that we can work with for the year, If that's going to work, that's what we need to do. We also have the published budget that is not a lot, but a little bit more. I've got to say this, as I looked at the tax responsibility, again, all we can do, and Brent did this, and I agree, I personally agree with, we just got to go with our own experience, what we're experiencing, what we've seen. And as I looked at what I pay the city of Chubbuck in my property taxes, I pay more every month for my internet service than I do for that. And I sat down and thought, now, what services am I getting from the city of Chubbuck, and what services am I getting from my internet provider? And if it wasn't for the fact that my business is so connected to that internet, I would have disconnected that day. But I just want to say this, that this general attitude of, well, if it's a government, there's waste. We've got a little sign down the street that says a penny saved is a government oversight. That's a general attitude that's out there, and I get it. At the federal level, you hear about $500 hammers, and it just makes you boil. But at the city level, I believe that our funds are taken care of well. I believe that we get the most bang for the buck at the city level. You go up to the county level, when was the last time you participated with a county budget hearing? You can, but very few people do. When was the last time you went to Boise and participated with the state budget level? For one thing, I guarantee up in there, you'd be in over your head, you'd wonder what the heck they were talking about. They don't talk about dollars and cents, they talk about no cents. And then go to the federal level. And I just want to state publicly that as far as the city of Chubbuck is concerned, I don't see waste. I don't. And I have, one of my mantras from the first time I got involved with public service was anybody, any citizen that sees what they consider to be waste, please come and talk to me about it. Let's talk it out. I've had a few come. I've had several come. And we've had good discussions. And those discussions have always ended with, we really don't believe there is waste here. We see what we're doing, and it's appropriate. But I think sometimes we take almost a bum rap in that because people can come here more easily than Washington, D.C. or Boise or even down to the courthouse, sometimes the city council is the one that gets wrapped on the head because of this general feel that the government wastes money. And I just want to say it's been stated 2 or 3 times publicly, twice by me and several times by people putting words in my mouth, that I have great confidence in the department heads of the city of Chubbuck, and I want to say that's true. I do. That doesn't mean that I'm going to rubber stamp everything. I don't. I've been over line items. I've sat down with each of our department heads and we'll talk those line items and feel very confident in what's happening. So in my opinion, that's where we are. We're talking about the proposed, the published, and coming up with where we're going to feel comfortable in 2 weeks. Because at that point, we, by law, have to set a budget. It has to be set in stone. Budgets, at their very best, are the best estimates. They're the best guesses we can make. They're not perfect. And one of the things I see is you set up an austere budget, you're setting up the need for emergency planning, emergency spending. You're setting that up because they're going to happen. As I looked at the snow removal, we've had a couple of years in a row that haven't been too awful bad. And it's not a huge budget, but okay, we cut that budget back because we say, okay, we can. But what do we do when this coming winter, we have a huge winter and we have a lot of snow? Do we just not take the snow off the streets? Now here we go with some public safety issues. So how do our police respond? How do the fire department respond if we haven't got the snow removed? And so again, like I said, that's my feel is that we have a good budget right now, and yeah, we could make an austere budget, but I don't think we should. So that's what I see us tasked at, is determining where we'll go between those 2 budgets. And if there are other fields that maybe those budgets aren't in line, we need to talk that too.